You're not actually making that drink right. Davyn froze mid-pour, the vodka bottle hovering over the shaker. She looked up slowly, carefully, the way she'd been trained to when someone clocked you doing something you shouldn't. But the man standing on the other side of the bar wasn't angry. He was smiling. Sort of. It was the kind of smile that made her stomach flip because it didn't reach his eyes. "Excuse me?" she said, keeping her voice light, friendly, like she wasn't an FBI agent with a wire taped under her ribs. "The martini," he said, tilting his head slightly. "You're shaking it. You're supposed to stir it." James Bond lied to everyone. Davyn blinked. Then she laughed because what else could she do? "Guess I'm busted." "Guess so." He didn't move. Just stood there in a black suit, hands in his pockets, watching her like he had all the time in the world. The music in Vega was loud enough to swallow most conversations, but somehow his voice cut through it like glass. "You knew?" he asked. "First week," she said, which was true. "Technically." "Thought so." He leaned forward just a little, enough that she caught the scent of expensive cologne and something else, something warmer. "What's your name?" "Davyn." "Davyn?" he repeated like he was testing it. "I'm Matteo." She already knew that. She'd studied his face for 3 weeks before she ever walked through the door of this place. "Nice to meet you," she said, smiling like she didn't know who he was. "Yeah," he said quietly. "You too." Then he walked away. Davyn exhaled slowly, her hands shaking just enough that she had to grip the edge of the bar to steady them. That was him. That was the guy. And he just walked up to her like it was nothing, like she wasn't a federal agent sent to destroy his life. Maybe he didn't suspect anything. Maybe she was just paranoid. Or maybe he already knew. Welcome to Honeybee Mafia Tales, where the lies are smooth and the truth cuts deep. Let's step behind that bar and see just how far this goes. Davyn had been undercover before. Twice. Once as a paralegal in a money laundering case, and the second time as a personal assistant to a weapons dealer in Miami. She was good at this. She knew how to blend in, how to listen without looking like she was listening, how to ask questions that didn't sound like questions. But something about Vega made her uneasy. Maybe it was the way everyone moved through the space like they were part of a machine. Maybe it was the way Matteo's name hung in the air even when he wasn't in the room. Or maybe it was the fact that her supervisor, Agent Harlan Cross, had pulled her into his office 3 days before the assignment and told her something that didn't sit right. Harlan's office smelled like burnt coffee and old ambition. Davyn sat across from him with her hands in her lap and her face carefully neutral, the way she always did when she knew she wasn't going to like what came next. "Matteo Lombardi," Harlan said, dropping a thick folder on the desk between them. 34. Born in Naples, raised in Brooklyn. Moved to Chicago 8 years ago. Owns Vega, 3 restaurants, 2 hotels, and a private events company. On paper he's clean. In reality, he tapped the folder. Not even close. Davyn opened it. Crime scene photos. Financial records. Surveillance shots of Matteo coming and going from Vega at odd hours. She flipped through them slowly. "What am I looking at?" she asked. "Money laundering," Harlan said, settling back in his chair. "Sophisticated stuff. Vegas seats 300 people on a good night. Average drink price is $15. Even if that place is packed 7 nights a week, 52 weeks a year, the math gives you maybe $1 million annually. Tops. But his tax returns show $4 million a month coming through that club alone." Harlan let that land. Somebody's feeding dirty money into his operation. Could either be extortion or money from people a lot scarier than Lombardi himself. Whatever it is, it's going in messy and coming out clean. And we can't figure out who's supplying it or where it's going after. Davyn studied a page of figures. "You have any names? Anyone he's meeting with?" "We have fragments. Names of people he's meeting with. We just can't connect them to the money yet. That's what we need you for." "What exactly is my job?" "You're going in as a bartender. We've already planted your cover. Background's clean, references check out. You'll have access to the main floor, the VIP section, and if you play it right, the back offices." He leaned forward, fingers steepled. "We need hard evidence. Ledgers, emails, transaction records. Names of people he's meeting with. Anything that connects the money coming in to the people sending it." "And Lombardi himself?" "Smart," Harlan said. "Very smart. He's been on our radar for 2 years and we've got nothing that sticks. Every time we get close, something falls apart. Witnesses go quiet. Evidence goes missing. He's either very careful or very lucky." Davyn looked up from the folder. "Or someone's helping him." Harlan smiled. "Not the warm kind. That's why I'm sending you instead of someone he might already know. You're fresh. No history or connections to anyone he's dealt with before. He paused. Get close to him. Get inside his operation. However you need to. Davyn didn't like the way he said that. The however you need to, that leaves too much room. She closed the folder and slid it back across the desk. And if he's more dangerous than the file suggests? Then you be more careful than you think you need to be, Harlan said simply. Like that was an answer. Davyn picked up her copy of the briefing documents and stood. She was almost at the door when Harlan said her name. One more thing, he said. Lombardi doesn't trust easily. Never has. But when he does trust someone. He paused, and again something felt off about his tone. Something she couldn't name. He trusts them completely. Remember that. Davyn nodded and left. She didn't think about that last line until much later. Until it was too late to pretend it hadn't meant something. She spent the next 3 weeks studying everything in that folder before she ever walked through Vega's door. Davyn hadn't liked the assignment. She still didn't. But she was here now and she had a job to do. The problem was Matteo kept showing up. Not in an obvious way. But every night she worked, she'd see him at least once. Sometimes he'd sit at the bar and order a whiskey neat. Sometimes he'd just walk past and nod at her. Once he stopped to ask if she was getting used to the place. Yeah, she'd said. Everyone's been nice. Good, he'd said. Let me know if that changes. And then he'd left again. It was driving her insane. Does he always do that? She asked Gina, one of the other bartenders, a girl with sharp eyeliner and a sharper tongue. Do what? Just, I don't know, wander around like he's checking on people? Gina shrugged. He owns the place. He can do whatever he wants. Yeah, but doesn't it feel, I don't know, weird? Weird how? Davyn hesitated. She couldn't say what she really meant, which was that it felt like he was watching her specifically. That every time he looked at her, it was like he was trying to figure something out. Never mind, she said. Gina gave her a look. You think he's into you or something? What? No. Because he doesn't date staff. Like ever. So if that's what you're hoping for, don't. I'm not hoping for anything, Davyn said quickly. Too quickly. Gina smirked. Sure. Davyn was really just trying to stay focused and do her job. Except every time Matteo looked at her, something in her chest twisted in a way that had nothing to do with the mission. Which was a problem. A big one. 2 weeks in, things started to shift. Matteo stopped just passing by. He started staying. Not for long, maybe 10-15 minutes at a time, but long enough that people noticed. Even Davyn noticed. You're getting better, he said one night, watching her pour a gin and tonic. At what? The drinks. She laughed. Geez, thanks. I'm serious, he said, and the way he said it made her look up. You learn fast. Guess I'm motivated. By what? She hesitated. That was a dangerous question. I don't know. I just like doing things right. He nodded slowly, like that made sense to him. Yeah, I get that. There was something in his voice that made her pause. Something almost, sad? She couldn't tell. But before she could figure it out, someone called his name from across the room and he was gone again. Davyn let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Girl, Gina said, sliding up next to her. You're in trouble. What are you talking about? He likes you. He doesn't like me. He barely knows me. Exactly, Gina said, grinning. And he still can't stop looking at you. Trust me. I've worked here for 3 years. I've never seen him act like this. Davyn wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Because deep down she knew Gina was right. And that terrified her. Because if Matteo liked her, that meant he trusted her. And if he trusted her, she could get close. She could get the evidence she needed and finish the job. But that night driving home she caught herself replaying the way he'd said you learn fast, and she had to turn the radio up loud to drown it out. 3 weeks in, Matteo invited her to stay after closing. Just for a drink, he said. If you want. Davyn knew she should say no. She knew she should keep her distance, keep things professional, keep herself safe. But she also knew this was an opportunity. A chance to see him outside of the carefully controlled environment of the club. So she said yes. They sat at the bar, the lights dimmed, the music off. It was strange how quiet the place was without the noise. Almost peaceful. Matteo poured them both a whiskey. You ever bartended before this? Once or twice, she lied. Nothing fancy. Why'd you stop? Life happened. He nodded like that was answer enough. You from Chicago? No. Moved here a few years ago. For work. Something like that. He smiled just a little. You don't like talking about yourself. Not really. Why not? Because people always want to know more than you want to tell them. He looked at her and for a second she thought maybe he saw through her. Maybe he knew exactly who she was and what she was doing there. But then he just nodded. Yeah, he said quietly. I get that too. They sat in silence for a while, sipping whiskey, not talking. And somehow that felt more dangerous than anything else. Because Davyn realized, sitting there in the dark with him, that she didn't want to leave. She didn't want the night to end. And that scared her more than anything. The next morning she called Harlan. I'm making progress, she said. He's starting to trust me. Good, Harlan said. Keep it up. We need something soon. How soon? Soon. Davyn hung up and stared at her phone. She thought about the way Matteo had looked at her the night before. The way he'd smiled. The way he'd said, I get that too. And she wondered, not for the first time, if maybe she was in over her head. 4 weeks in and she still had nothing solid. Just fragments. Overheard conversations. Delivery logs that almost added up but not quite. Earlier that evening, Matteo had walked in with 2 cups and handed her one without saying anything, like it was the most natural thing in the world. You look tired, he'd said when she stared at him. I am tired. Then drink the coffee. She had. And it was good. And he'd smiled at her like maybe she was something worth caring about. And now she was stealing from him. The next night Matteo asked her to dinner. He said he knew a place, a little Italian spot in Lincoln Park that didn't have a sign and didn't take reservations unless you knew the owner. Which obviously he did. Davyn knew this was crossing a line. But she also knew this was exactly the kind of opportunity she needed. If she could get him talking outside of the controlled environment where everyone was watching, maybe she could learn something. Maybe she could find out who he was really working with, where the money was going, what he was hiding. So she said yes. The restaurant was small, tucked into a side street she'd never noticed before. Inside it smelled like garlic and basil and something sweet she couldn't name. There were maybe 10 tables, all of them full, all of them quiet. The kind of place where people came to talk, not to be seen. Matteo led her to a corner table, away from the windows. He pulled out her chair before she could do it herself, and she had to bite back the instinct to tell him she didn't need help. Because that wasn't who Davyn the bartender was. Davyn the bartender probably thought this was romantic. You come here a lot? She asked once they were seated. When I can, he said. The owner's an old friend. How old? Knew my father. That was the first time he'd mentioned his family. Davyn tucked it away. Your father live in Chicago? No. Matteo's expression didn't change, but something in his voice did. He's dead. Oh. Davyn hesitated. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. Still. He looked at her then, and there was something in his eyes she couldn't read. Something heavy. You close with your family? Davyn thought about her father. Agent Raymond Cole. Retired now, living in Virginia with his second wife. She hadn't seen him in 6 months. Hadn't called him in 3. Yeah, she lied. Pretty close. Matteo nodded, but he didn't say anything else. The waiter came by and rattled off the specials in rapid Italian. Matteo answered in the same language, fluently, and Davyn realized she had no idea what he'd just ordered for her. You trust me? He asked, smirking. Apparently. Good. The food came fast. Pasta with something creamy and rich, bread that was still warm, wine that tasted expensive. Davyn ate slowly, carefully, trying to pace herself, trying to stay sharp. But the wine was good and the atmosphere was warm and Matteo was looking at her like she was the only person in the room. Can I ask you something? He said after a while. Sure. Why'd you really move to Chicago? Davyn's stomach dropped. She kept her face neutral. I told you. Work. Yeah, but what kind of work? Does it matter? Maybe. She took a sip of wine, buying herself time. I needed a fresh start. Old life wasn't working out. Bad breakup. Something like that. He nodded like that made sense. You running from something? Everyone's running from something, she said, and the moment the words left her mouth she realized how true they were. Matteo smiled, but it was a sad smile. Yeah, I guess they are. They didn't talk much after that. Just ate and drank and sat in the kind of comfortable silence that felt too easy, too real. And when Matteo walked her back to her car later, he didn't try to kiss her. He just said goodnight and watched her drive away. Davyn didn't call Harlan that night. She told herself it was because she didn't have anything new to report. But the truth was she didn't want to hear his voice. She didn't want to be reminded of why she was really there. A week later everything changed. Davyn was in the back office, uploading photos of the latest delivery logs to her phone, when she heard footsteps. She froze, her heart slamming against her ribs. The door was supposed to be locked. She checked it twice. But the handle was turning and there was no time to hide and no excuse that would make sense. The door opened. It was Matteo. He looked at her. Then at the phone in her hand. Then back at her. The room went quiet. "Matteo," she started, her voice shaking. "I can explain." "You're FBI," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "Come." Certain. Like he'd known all along. Davyn's mouth went dry. "What?" "You're FBI," he said again, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "You've been taking pictures of my files, listening to my conversations, probably wearing a wire. Am I right?" She couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed at her to deny it, to lie, to run. But the way he was looking at her, she knew it wouldn't work. He already knew. He'd probably known from the beginning. "How long?" she whispered. "How long have I known?" Matteo tilted his head. "Since before you walked through the door." Davyn felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "That's not possible." "I requested you," he said simply. "Specifically." "That doesn't make any sense." "Doesn't it?" He stepped closer and she had to fight the urge to back away. "I needed someone from the bureau. Someone I could trust. Someone who wouldn't be on anyone's payroll but theirs." "Why?" "Because someone's stealing from me," Matteo said, his voice low and sharp. "And whoever it is has connections inside law enforcement. I can't trust my own people. So I went to yours." Davyn stared at him. "You're saying you brought me here on purpose?" "Yes." "And you've just been, watching me this whole time?" "Yes." "Why didn't you just tell me?" "Because I needed to make sure you were real," Matteo said. "I needed to know you weren't already compromised. That you'd actually do your job." Davyn felt like she was going to be sick. "So this whole time you've been playing me?" "No." His voice softened. "I've been protecting you." "From what?" "From whoever set you up to fail." She laughed, but it came out bitter. "Nobody set me up. I was assigned here." "By who?" "Agent Harlan Cross." Matteo's expression darkened. "Yeah. That's what I thought." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Harlan is working for someone," Matteo said. "Someone who wants me gone. And whoever it is has someone inside this building helping them drain my businesses quietly. I just don't know who yet or how deep it goes." Davyn shook her head. "That's insane. Harlan's been with the Bureau for 20 years. He's clean." "Is he?" Matteo pulled out his phone and swiped through a few screens before handing it to her. "Then explain this." It was a bank statement. The name at the top read H. Cross. And the deposits, dozens of them, all came from offshore accounts tied to businesses Davyn recognized. Businesses the Bureau had been investigating. Businesses Matteo owned. Her hands started shaking. "Where did you get this?" "I have people who are very good at finding things. This could be fake." "It's not." Davyn looked up at him, her chest tight. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I need your help," Matteo said. "And because you deserve to know the truth." "What truth?" He hesitated. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. "The truth about why Harlan wanted you here. And the truth about your father." Davyn's blood went cold. "What does my father have to do with this?" Matteo didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, and in that moment she saw something she'd never seen before. Pain. Real raw pain. 20 years ago, he said quietly, "my father was killed. The man who made sure no one ever went to prison for it was a federal agent. A decorated one. Everyone loved and trusted him." Davyn's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear him. "His name," Matteo said, "was Raymond Cole." The world tilted. "No," she whispered. "I have the file," Matteo said. "Every document. Every witness statement. Every piece of evidence that was buried. Your father made a deal with the people who killed my father. He protected them. And in return they made him a hero." Davyn couldn't move. "I didn't know who you were when I asked for you," Matteo said. "I found out later. And I almost called the whole thing off. But then I thought maybe this is how it's supposed to be. Maybe you're the one person who can help me make this right." "You're lying," Davyn said, but her voice cracked. "I wish I was." She wanted to scream. Wanted to call her father and demand answers. But instead she just stood there, staring at the man she'd been sent to destroy, realizing that everything she thought she knew was a lie. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she whispered. "Because I needed to know if I could trust you," Matteo said. "And because I didn't want to hurt you." "Well, congratulations," she said bitterly. "You failed." He flinched. And somehow that made it worse. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't." She shook her head, backing toward the door. Just don't. Davyn. I need to think. She left before he could say anything else. And when she got to her car, she sat in the driver's seat and cried for the first time in years. Because the man she'd been hunting wasn't the villain. And the man she'd spent her whole life admiring wasn't the hero. And she had no idea what to do about any of it. Davyn didn't go home that night. She drove to a motel on the outskirts of the city, paid cash, and sat on the edge of a bed that smelled like bleach and regret. Her phone buzzed every 10 minutes. Harlan. Then Matteo. Then Harlan again. She ignored them both. At 3 in the morning she picked up her phone and typed one message to her father. I'm working with Matteo Lombardi now. I know about Naples. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she hit send. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately. He was awake. Reading it. Whatever he typed next, she didn't want to see it. She turned the phone face down on the nightstand. The next morning she went back to Vega. Matteo was in his office, sitting behind his desk with a cup of coffee and a look on his face like he hadn't slept either. When she walked in, he stood up fast, like he wasn't sure if she was going to yell at him or punch him or just leave again. She sat down in the chair across from his desk, suddenly exhausted. Show me the file. You sure? No. But show me anyway. Matteo opened a drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. He slid it across the desk. Davyn stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Inside were police reports, witness statements, photos she wished she'd never seen. Her father's signature was on half the documents. The other half had been redacted, blacked out, erased. But the story was clear enough. Matteo's father, a businessman who'd refused to cooperate with a criminal organization, had been killed in his own home. The case had been handed to the FBI. And Agent Davyn Cole had made sure it went nowhere. Why? Davyn whispered. Money probably, Matteo said quietly. Or maybe they had something on him. I don't know. I've spent 5 years trying to find out and I still don't have the full picture. Davyn closed the folder. She felt numb. What do you want from me? I want to take down the people who are still stealing from me, Matteo said. And I want to make sure your father's name ends up in the right place when this is over. You mean you want revenge? I want justice. What's the difference? Matteo leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. Justice means everyone sees the truth. Revenge is just for me. I'm offering you justice. Davyn looked at him. And she realized that somewhere along the way, between the lies and the drinks and the quiet conversations, she'd started to care about him. Not because of the mission. Not because of the job. Just because he was him. If I help you, she said slowly, I lose everything. My career. My reputation. Maybe my freedom. I know. And if I don't? Then Harlan keeps stealing. Your father's secret stays buried. And you spend the rest of your life wondering if you did the right thing. Davyn closed her eyes. I hate you. I know. I mean it. I know. She opened her eyes. What's the plan? The plan was simple. Dangerous but simple. Harlan was moving money through a shell company tied to one of Matteo's restaurants. He'd been doing it for years, skimming off the top and covering his tracks with fake reports and doctored evidence. But he'd gotten sloppy. Overconfident. And Matteo had the proof. What they needed now was a confession. Something on record. Something undeniable. That's where Davyn came in. She called Harlan and told him she had something urgent to discuss. Something about Matteo. He agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown. The coffee shop was small and unremarkable, the kind of place nobody important ever went. That was the point. Davyn got there 20 minutes early, picked a table near the back, and sat with her hands wrapped around a cup she wasn't drinking. She was wearing a wire. Not the bureau's. Matteo's people had fitted it that morning. She'd worn wires before. She knew how to breathe around them, how to not think about what happened if someone found it. She thought about it anyway. Harlan walked in at exactly noon. He looked the same as he always did. Pressed shirt. Easy smile. The kind of face that made juries trust him and criminals underestimate him. He spotted her, ordered a coffee at the counter, and sat down across from her. You sounded tense on the phone, he said. I'm fine. You don't look fine. He studied her. What's going on? Davyn kept her voice even. I think Matteo knows I'm FBI. Harlan's expression didn't change. That was the thing about him. It never changed. What makes you think that? The way he's been acting. Asking questions. Pulling back. She paused. I think someone tipped him off. That's a serious accusation. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm telling you what I'm observing. Harlan nodded slowly, wrapping both hands around his cup. And what do you want me to do about it? I want to know if there's a leak. There's always a leak somewhere, Harlan said pleasantly. That's the job. This feels different. How so? Davyn leaned forward slightly. Because every case against Lombardi falls apart. She held his gaze. That's not bad luck. That's someone helping him. Harlan looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. Slow and certain, like she just said something amusing. You've been spending too much time in that club. Maybe. Lombardi's charming. I've heard that about him. Makes people see things that aren't there. He tilted his head. He said something to you? He showed me something. What kind of something? Bank statements, Davyn said carefully. Offshore accounts. A name I recognized. Harlan didn't move. Didn't blink. Just watched her with that same easy expression. Whose name? Yours. Harlan went still. The coffee shop hummed around them. He picked up his cup and took a slow sip, like she'd said something normal. And you believe him, Harlan said finally. I believe evidence. Evidence he gave you. Harlan set his cup down carefully. A criminal who is currently under federal investigation. He looked at her steadily. Think about what you're saying, Davyn. I have been thinking about it. Have you? Because what I'm hearing is that you've been compromised, and now you're sitting across from your supervising agent implying he's corrupt. His voice stayed calm. Do you understand how that looks? Davyn's jaw tightened. I understand exactly how it looks. Good. Then you understand that right now, the person in this room whose career is in danger isn't me. He leaned forward just slightly. It's you. The words landed like stones. Davyn kept her face still. I pulled your file this morning, Harlan continued, his voice dropping just enough that no one nearby could hear. You've been inside that club for 5 weeks. In that time you've had dinner alone with Lombardi, stayed after closing on at least 2 occasions, and failed to report several interactions that should have been documented immediately. He paused. That's not an agent doing her job. That's an agent who's been turned. I haven't been turned. Prove it. I'm trying to. No, Harlan said quietly. You're trying to protect him. And I don't know if that's because you believe his story or because you've developed feelings for him, but either way you're done. I'm pulling you from the assignment. Davyn stared at him. You can't do that. I already did. This morning. Before I came here. He smiled again. I told them you'd shown signs of emotional compromise. They agreed it was best to bring you in. The floor felt like it was tilting. You set this up. I'm protecting the investigation. You're protecting yourself. Harlan stood, buttoning his jacket with the unhurried ease of a man who had never once been caught at anything. Go home, Davyn. Hand in your access badge. Write up your final report and make sure it's thorough. He picked up his coffee. And stay away from Lombardi. Whatever he told you, it's not worth your freedom. He left. Davyn sat very still. Her hands were shaking under the table. Her coffee had gone cold. She reached up slowly and pressed 2 fingers against her ribs, feeling the faint outline of the wire beneath her shirt. Every word. Recorded. The threat wasn't everything she needed. But it was a start. Davyn was at Matteo's office by 7 the next morning. He was already there, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking like he hadn't slept. When she walked in he stood up fast. Well, he said. He didn't confess, Davyn said, dropping into the chair across from his desk. But he did something almost better. She pulled out her phone and played the recording. Matteo listened without moving. When it finished he was quiet for a long moment. He pulled you from the assignment, he said. Preemptively. Before he even met me. He'd already filed the paperwork. She shook her head. He knew I was getting close. Someone told him. Someone inside the club. Has to be. Davyn rubbed her eyes. The question is whether this recording is even usable. It is, Matteo said. He moved to his desk and picked up his phone, typing something quickly. Illinois is a one-party consent state. You knew you were being recorded. That makes it legal. I know that. But it was recorded on your equipment. For you. A defense lawyer could argue the chain of custody is compromised. So we don't give it to a lawyer, Matteo said. We give it to someone who can't be touched by Harlan. Who? He looked up from his phone. The Department of Justice directly. If Harlan has people inside the bureau watching for exactly this kind of move, internal affairs is compromised before the file even lands on a desk. Davyn stared at him. You have a contact at the DOJ? I have contacts everywhere. That's how I've survived this long. Matteo? Her name is Sandra Reeves, he said. Assistant U.S. Attorney. She's been trying to build a case against corrupt law enforcement for 3 years. She's clean. I had her vetted independently. He slid a business card across the desk. She'll know what to do with it. Davyn picked up the card. And you trust her? More than I trust anyone with a badge right now. He paused. No offense. None taken. Davyn set the card down. But one recording of him threatening me isn't enough to bring him down. He's going to start covering tracks. I know, Matteo said. That's why the recording is just the first piece. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a USB drive. This is everything. The bank statements. The shell company documents. Transaction records going back 6 years. Davyn looked at the drive. How long have you been building this? For years. Why didn't you just go to the DOJ yourself? Because I'm a man with a complicated reputation and no federal badge, Matteo said quietly. I needed someone the system would listen to. He looked at her steadily. I needed you. Davyn picked up the USB. And if Reeves buries it? She won't. But if she does? Matteo met her eyes. Then we go to the press. Okay, she said. Let's do it. Davyn's phone rang at 6 in the morning, 2 days after her meeting with Harlan. She was already awake. She'd barely slept. She looked at the screen and felt her stomach drop. Victor Caldwell. She answered on the second ring. You've been pulled, Victor said. I know. They want you in the office by 9. I can't come in. Silence. Long enough that she knew he was thinking. Where are you? He asked. I can't tell you that either. Another silence. Davyn. Victor, listen to me. She kept her voice low. Harlan is dirty. I have evidence. That's a significant claim. I know how it sounds. It sounds like exactly what a compromised agent would say to explain why she went rogue, Victor said quietly. I know that too. Davyn closed her eyes. That's why I'm not bringing it to the Bureau. I'm taking it to the DOJ directly. Sandra Reeves. A longer silence this time. I'll slow things down, Victor said carefully. I told them you'd checked in with me and were cooperating with the review process. That bought you maybe 48 hours before someone starts asking questions I can't answer. He hung up. 40 hours later, everything was in Sandra Reeves' hands. 3 days later, Victor called again. Harlan's been suspended pending investigation, he said. 2 other agents have been flagged. The DOJ has a grand jury convening next week. And me? He paused. Formal review starts Monday. I'll be there. Victor. You knew this was coming, he said simply. I know. It's going to be ugly for a while. I know. Whatever happens after. It'll be real. Davyn sat with that for a moment. Real. After weeks of lies and cover stories and playing someone she wasn't, real felt like something worth fighting for. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me, Victor said. Just don't make me regret it. 3 weeks later, Harlan was arrested on a Tuesday morning. The news hit every major outlet by noon. Veteran FBI agent charged with corruption, evidence tampering, conspiracy. By the end of the week, 3 other people had been arrested. People Davyn had worked with and trusted. Matteo found out who the insider was 3 days after Harlan's arrest. He didn't tell Davyn the name. He just came into Vega one morning, walked past the bar without a word, and by afternoon that person was gone. Matteo handled some things quietly. This was one of them. In the weeks that followed, the DOJ formally closed its investigation into Matteo's businesses. Every financial irregularity traced back to accounts Harlan and the insider had controlled. Matteo was clear. Officially, permanently, on record. Davyn drove to Virginia on a Thursday. She rang the bell. Her father answered in less than a minute. He took one look at her face and stepped back to let her in without a word. They sat in his study. His wife had taken one look at Davyn's expression and quietly disappeared upstairs. Matteo Lombardi told you, her father said. Yes. And you believe him? I believe the file, Davyn said. Raymond leaned back in his chair. What do you want me to say? He asked. The truth. The truth, he repeated. The truth is that you don't understand how this works. You've been an agent for what, 2 years? You think you know who these people are? I know what you did. You know a fraction of it, he said sharply. You know the piece that makes Lombardi look like the victim and me look like the villain. He shook his head. His father wasn't innocent, Davyn. Nobody in that world is innocent. He was a businessman who refused to cooperate with a criminal organization and got killed for it, Davyn said. That's in the file. That's one version of the file. It's the true version. Truth is complicated. No, Davyn said, her voice hardening. It isn't. Not this time. A man was murdered. You made sure nobody answered for it. That's not complicated. That's just wrong. Raymond's jaw tightened. I protected this family. I protected you. I think you should leave, he said quietly. I think so too, Davyn said. She picked up her jacket, walked to the door and stopped. The DOJ has everything, she said without turning around. They're going to find your name in there, Dad. And when they come, there won't be anyone left to make it disappear. She heard him exhale behind her. I'll handle it, he said. No, Davyn said. You won't. She left. 1 week later, Raymond Cole was arrested at his home. Davyn saw it on the news. She watched the footage once, then turned off the television and sat in the quiet of her apartment for a long time. She didn't cry. She'd already done that. She just sat there thinking about the father she'd thought she had and the man he'd turned out to be. Eventually she got up, made coffee and called Matteo. I saw, he said when he answered. Yeah. You okay? Davyn thought about it honestly. Not yet, she said. But I will be. Yeah, Matteo said quietly. Me too. 2 weeks passed before she felt ready to see him in person. Matteo was sitting at the bar alone, staring at a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. When he saw her, he stood up. Hey, he said. Hey. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then Davyn said, It's done. I know. You get what you wanted? Some of it. He hesitated. Not all of it. What's missing? He looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her chest ache. You. Davyn shook her head. Matteo? I know, he said quickly. I know this is complicated. I know you have every reason to hate me. But I need you to know that everything I felt, everything that happened between us, that was real. I didn't plan that. I didn't want that. But it happened anyway. I lied to you, Davyn said, her voice breaking. For weeks. So did I. That doesn't make it okay. No, Matteo said. It doesn't. But maybe we can figure out how to make it okay. Eventually. Davyn wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him it was too late, too broken, too far gone. But the truth was she didn't want to leave. She didn't want to walk away from the one person who'd seen her at her worst and hadn't run. I don't know if I can trust you, she whispered. I don't know if I can trust you either, Matteo said. But I want to try. Davyn looked at this man who had turned her entire life upside down and showed her the truth even when it hurt. Okay, she said finally. Let's try. The months that followed were the hardest of her life. The review. The hearings. The press. Her name dragged through everything she'd spent years building. But she got through it. 6 months later, Davyn got promoted. The DOJ review concluded that her actions, while unconventional, had directly led to the takedown of a corrupt 20-year veteran and a conspiracy that had compromised the Bureau for years. Her methods were messy but not her results. Sandra Reeves personally requested her transfer to the DOJ's internal corruption unit. The Bureau didn't fight it. They couldn't. Matteo was there in the small moments. Coffee on Sunday mornings. Dinner at that little Italian place. Late-night phone calls when she couldn't sleep. They didn't talk about the past much. It was still too raw. Too complicated. But they talked about the future. About what they wanted. About who they were trying to become. And one night, sitting on her couch with takeout containers scattered on the coffee table, Matteo said, I think I'm falling in love with you. Davyn looked at him. You think? Okay, I know. Even after everything? Especially after everything. Davyn smiled. A real smile. The kind she hadn't felt in months. Yeah. Me too. Matteo kissed her then. Soft and careful, like he was afraid she'd disappear. And for the first time in a long time, Davyn felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be perfect. But it would be real. And that was enough. Every empire has a secret buried underneath it. We find them. We tell them. And we don't apologize for the truth. Subscribe to Honeybee Mafia Tales, because the world wasn't ready for these stories. But you are. See you in the next chapter.